Good morning. Come on now. Good morning. Y'all haven't had a chance to really relish in the victory y'all had this past November. So good morning.
Good morning.
Much better. So look, I got this long speech and then I've been told, hey, there's a lot going on. Can you please scale it back? So I'm gonna give you the short version, all right? I get more cheers for that than anything else. Anyway, isn't it awesome to live in the incredible free state of Florida? So I got to spend yesterday with Governor DeSantis and Casey, First Lady, and we were up in Destin. I was telling Matt, it was interesting. We were at a church called Shoreline Church, and I'm walking up to this place, and I said, this used to be a nightclub. And we go in there, and the church, we're doing a press conference, and the press conference is about the fentanyl epidemic we're dealing with and the expansion of Narcan. And you know, it's kind of one of those things, we're in there, and just the irony of it. We're in a building that was a nightclub, and now it's a church, and we're talking about the fentanyl epidemic. And I just really appreciate how the governor and first lady, they have put themselves way out in front on so many issues. They work themselves very hard. They keep an incredible breakneck speed. At the same time, 3 little ones under the age of 6. So it's been exciting in Tallahassee, but it's a hell of a lot more fun when you've got a 400,000 vote margin over the Democratic Party. Thank you for what you're doing. Y'all ran the tables. Y'all ran the table this past election. Y'all sent Wilton Simpson to join the cabinet. We got rid of Nikki Freed. Thank you for doing that. And you know, it's been exciting. You know, you have been the wind beneath our wings. It's given us the passion. It's given us the courage. It's given us the appetite to take on some of the things that we should be taking on. So, you know, about a month and a half ago, the governor and I, we deplatformed, at least out of our state treasury, and we pulled all money out of BlackRock. We've got this environment. We've got this environment where ESG has infiltrated all of our processes. And in the case of BlackRock, they were taking our dollars and they were promulgating out there a woke agenda. They were using our resources to leverage and influence other companies. And so, I mean, I told our guys, I said, go look at their performance. Their performance was the middle of the pack. Okay, there was all these other fund. I said, there's no reason why, if they're not performing based on, you know, we move our money. And Daddy always said, if you want to get somebody's attention, you get in their pocketbook. So it's exactly what we did. Florida today is the largest. We move more money out of BlackRock than any other state. And they're the biggest player. We're seeing where credit card companies are now flagging purchases of firearms and munitions. We're not going to allow that to continue in the state of Florida. Thank you, Wilton Simpson, for working on that. And lastly, we're going to see a big change in our state. 2 things we got to do. I want to brag about Blaze a minute. We've seen a major push by the expansion of the IRS. $80 billion was invested in order to hit this new delta of $250 billion in revenue. So this legislation back in August, the Inflation Reduction Act, it did as much for lowering inflation as the Affordable Care Act did for making health care affordable. And it was a total partisan bill. There was no Republican input, but it was the inmates running the asylum, and Congress spent money on things that nobody asked for. So we in Florida, we're going to figure out, all right, we got to push back. So Blaze Ngolia, I don't know if Blaze is still here. He probably, Blaze here. Thank you, Senator Ngolia, for what you're doing. So Blaze is running a piece of legislation that we're really excited about, and it's our pushback to fight against the IRS money grab. So we're going to do 4 things in the bill. Give him a round of applause. Thank you, Blaze. What we're going to do is, number 1, we're going to tell state banks, if you're engaged by the IRS, you're going to report that We're going to report that to the state of Florida. Number two, we're going to incentivize Floridians to fight back. If you are engaged by the IRS and you take them to court and you win, we're going to make you whole on your legal fees. Number three, we're going to establish criminal penalties for those IRS investigators that show a partisan partisan investigation practice. We saw it with the Tea Party movement in 2015. In 2017, the IRS actually admitted it. So look, when you bring 87,000 new agents, if you're just 1%, you're going to tell me that 870 of them don't have some type of personal agenda. So we're going to push back there. And then fourth, we're going to throw big tech into the mix with red tape. So did y'all follow where the IRS was asking, now we want to track all transactions of $600 or more? Did you keep up with that? Okay, that used to be a number of $10,000. So this is another deep dive reach by the IRS going into the pockets of small businesses and independent gig workers. I mean, so look, we said, look, if you want to go after that, you go after big tech and you get big tech to provide you that money. But we're not going to expect our citizens, small business, to keep up with your ridiculous asks. So I just really appreciate Toby Ogledorf in the House and then Blazing Goliath here in the Senate. But look, we are seeing so many major issues that are not being addressed. I will keep my comments short, but what I want to just make sure that you know is I'm accessible, but more importantly is you got to hold us accountable, okay? All of us put our names on the ballots. I expect you to reach out to us. I expect you to engage us. I expect you to hold us accountable. Everybody that sits on these first couple rows, we've all ran for statewide office. A lot of y'all have run for office. When you subject yourself to that, there's some expectations, and the expectations is to be responsible. You can email me at jimmy@joinjimmy.com. All right. You can call me at 850-583-1817, or follow me on Twitter at Jimmy Petronis. I don't have as many followers as Matt Gaetz, but I do like the engagement. And look, it's been the honor of a lifetime. Thank you for supporting Katie and I and the boys. Thank you for making the difference in the state of Florida and just making this place this incredible. I told folks yesterday, I was looking at what Governor Sanders has accomplished. And one of the things that I pointed out, we've got some law enforcement in the back of the room. When you walk out, make sure you tell them thank you for your service. We're in an environment right now where law enforcement isn't appreciated. And I think, the Dems have tried to pivot and push back. And Governor Sanders goes out and he pushes out bonuses to law enforcement for first responders, which is great. But if you ask any of them, just the simple appreciation they got is worth more than any zeros you can put on a check. The state of Florida is definitely backs our law enforcement. I appreciate the environment. I tell people, 900 people a day are moving the state of Florida. We've had $26 billion of new recurring wealth that's moved in this state, where California has lost $24 billion. So there's a migration. People are moving, but they won't move unless it's a safe place to move. If it's a place where you can raise a family, if it's a place where you can start a business, but it doesn't happen unless y'all hold us all accountable. All right, now my role is, is Senator Rubio here? Hey, there's Marco. So a lot of y'all don't realize, so Marco Rubio was my very first Speaker of the House that I got to work with. He has done an incredible job. I mean, this past week, I love what he's done. This past week, he's gone out and he is demanding transparency and pushback from the Biden administration, because right now there is a consideration of a partnership between the Communist Chinese Party of China investing in a battery plant with Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Michigan. And you know what? Marco's the first person who raised his hand and decided, you know what? We're not going to allow this to happen. We're going to push back. And we're not going to continue to allow China to come in and buy our food processing plants, buy our real estate outside of our military bases, or to continue to invest and then try to influence this country. He has been a leader in the Florida Senate. I love to point out he's the senior senator from the state of Florida. I know he enjoys that too. Your friend and my friend, Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you. I apologize a few minutes late. I came here on my balloon, and but we had to take a detour. We were afraid to get shot down. So by Pete Buttigieg, I don't know what this guy does. What does this guy have to do to be fired? Like how many, trains derailed, airplane meltdowns, and I heard this morning he's on vacation again. I don't know what this guy has to do to be fired. I actually called for him to be removed. Obviously, the president's not going to do it, but it's unbelievable. This guy's terrible. I mean, he's just a terrible Secretary of Transportation. I don't know what he does all day. Well, he gives speeches about how discriminatory construction work is in America. I don't know if you saw that. That's just my pet peeve. I'm here. I might as well be able to push on it because the guy sucks. I mean, he's terrible. Right, Matt? He's the worst. I think he has to be the worst transportation secretary I've ever had. All right, I've given him too much attention. Look, guys, thank you for everything you've done. Congratulations to the new chairman, obviously, and to. Is there a vote going on right now? Are you guys just waiting to hear who the vice chair is? Okay, so I'm the only thing standing in the way of like the outcome. Well, then I'll be short. But I thought maybe what I talked to you a little bit about. Look, politics. First of all, what is the party's job is to win elections, and we have big ones coming up in 24. We won big in 2022, obviously big margins. We more than carried the point spread, as I tell people. The governor won by what, 104 points? How many did he win by? And is Charlie Crist still in Florida? I even wonder, like, is He's on the balloon. Yeah. Maybe he wants to be transportation secretary. I don't know. But there might be an opening soon. But the point is, anyway, and the party was a big role in that regard. And that's the job of the party at the end of the day, is to win elections. And the mechanics, just telling you as a candidate, just coming off the ballot, at the end of the day, the stuff that really wins elections today, nowadays, is not the TV commercials, to be frank. I don't know how much those even matter anymore. I mean, you have to do them, because if you don't do them, it's just like signs. If you don't have them, everybody gets really mad that you don't have them. So you have to do them, and I'm not saying those things are irrelevant. But honestly, what wins the elections is identifying your supporters, having the data. First of all, you have to have supporters. You have to create them, but make sure you are creating enthusiasm. But then identifying these people and turning them out. Identifying who's there, making sure they vote. Turnout is everything, the mechanics of it. And that's how you win elections. And who does that? The party has to do that. And so the most important thing we have to be able to continue to do as a party, all the way through, from the top of the ticket on down, is the ability to have good data that we can identify, reach out to people, turn them out to vote, to ensure we have that turnout advantage. And not to take for granted that the Democrats today are a disaster in terms of organizationally. Okay? Their state party is a disaster. But you have to understand something. They don't need a state party as much as we do, because they've got the media, they've got labor unions, they've got special interest groups, they've got all the Soros umbrella of groups. These things pop up everywhere and all the time, not to mention social media and tech. And so, they can catch up very, very quickly, so we can never take that for granted, and that's really important. And it really is important in presidential, Senate, governor races, but it really matters when you're running for state representative, for Congress, for county commission, for the school board, because you don't have the resources to do all of that. You rely on the parties, through the local parties and from the state, to be able to do that. And so it's one of the things that I think we've learned how valuable it is. It's a competitive advantage for us in the state, and it's one we need to never lose. But the other thing about politics is we make it really complicated sometimes. It really isn't. Public service and politics is not, government service is really not that complicated. The only thing that matters in politics is having firm, clear, honest answers and positions on issues that really matter to real people. That's what matters. And what is that position? It's also not very complicated. Generally speaking, what people want out of life in this country, and I think all over the world, is they want to be able to live the life they want. They want freedom, they want security, and they want to be able to provide for themselves and their families, and they want their kids to have the chance to do whatever they want. They want their kids to have a chance to be better off than themselves. For most of our history, that wasn't a very complicated thing for people in government to understand. It even has a name. It's called the American Dream. Because while everybody in the world wants that, nowhere on this planet have people achieved those two things more than here in this country. And so if you want to know what the dividing line, one of the dividing lines in American politics today, and what's driving everything we're fighting over in the country, is between the people who want to focus on these things and the people who want to focus on things that don't matter, or the trivial. And that's a product of two things. The first, and I think it's important to understand that that's where the anger comes from. That's where the frustration in American politics comes from. is that you turn on the TV or you listen to your leaders or you vote for someone, and the first thing they do is go up there and they spend all their time and energy focused on the things that have nothing to do with living the life they want or leaving their kids better off than themselves. And today we are a country where a substantial majority of Americans feel left behind. And it's really frustrating when they turn on the TV and they hear, in years past, GDP growth is up and the economy is booming, but it doesn't feel like it for them. It doesn't feel like it for them. And the result has been two things. The first is that disconnect, and then the second is some people have one big, because they're in the right industries and the right cities, and those people have the luxury of affluence. So let me talk about that second part first. What's the luxury of affluence? The luxury of affluence is you are in an industry where you make so much money that it doesn't, and it's structured in a way that it doesn't matter if the economy shuts down because of a pandemic and they tell everybody to stay home. You can work from home on a laptop. And you can get paid as much as anybody else because your job is insulated from it. It doesn't matter if your kid's school doesn't open up for a year and a half because they go to a very elite private school. You can hire private tutors to come in, or their school probably opened. Some of the people who had closed schools, like in California and other places, were sending their kids to schools that opened a year ahead of time. So, but the other luxury that they have of this affluence is they have time to focus on things that don't matter. Like when you don't have to worry every day about your refrigerator breaking down and that being cataclysmic. Like one broken refrigerator away from cataclysm, when you don't have to worry about that because you're in an industry that you're insulated from those sorts of things, then you have time to worry about things that really don't matter to 99% of people. For example, you have time to worry about, is our military doing a good enough job of bringing in people who are transitioning in their gender? You have time to worry about things like, are we really doing a good enough job in our classrooms of convincing our kids that America is a historically and irredeemably racist and discriminatory country? Now you have the luxury of worrying about all these silly things. You have time to worry, and you have the freedom to believe these things. But are these really the priorities in our country? The answer is no. The problem is that the people in charge of everything, people in charge of media, people in charge of Hollywood, people in charge of government in many places, all the cultural leaders, all the leaders of universities and academia, all of them are not just beneficiaries of this affluence, but are all bought into this notion of these things that are irrelevant. So that's the first thing that we're facing. So imagine you're a person, you've been left behind, you feel like the economy's mistreating you, you're worse off than you were 10 years ago, and all your leaders want to do is focus on these sorts of things and police your language. But the second is the most important issue, and it's the one we need to be focused on, and that's this. The world has dramatically changed underneath us over the last 20 or 30 years. So if you go back, I don't want to go all the way back to the end of World War II, but basically that war ended, we went into a Cold War, and the world was dangerous, but it was simple to understand. There was the communist and there was the free world. Then that ends, and America's the only superpower on the planet. And what I'm about to tell you was a bipartisan consensus, because Republicans and Democrats believed it. And here's what they believed. Countries won't matter anymore. What matters now is a global economy. What matters now is a global economy where you put aside your national interest. Forget about whether something is good or bad for your country. If it's good for the global economy, we need to do it. And they promised peace, security, and prosperity. Everyone's going to be richer, everyone's going to be safer, and everything's going to be more peaceful. There was an old saying, 2 countries with McDonald's have never gone to war before. Ukraine has McDonald's and Russia has McDonald's, so apparently that's no longer true. But that was the belief. But economics is not just about numbers. Economics is a political statement. And when you argue that when you're going to make public decisions on your economy, you are going to put the interest of the global commons, the interest of the global economy, the interest of free trade, the interest of buying into that ahead of what's good for your country, you're going to have problems. Now, it wasn't as big a problem when the countries who were all buying into that were all democracies. They sort of shared the same values. They played by the rules. But then in 2001, they said, it would be a really good idea. We should bring Russia and China into the system. And there are speeches from Bill Clinton, from Joe Biden, from Republicans too, that argued this is good, guys, because not only are they going to be importing stuff, they're going to be importing our values. They're going to be eating Big Macs. They're going to be buying iPhones. And that's going to make them a freedom-loving democratic government. Because as we know, when you eat Big Macs, if you eat enough of them, you digest and you ingest these values, and it turns you into a free society. And it didn't work. The Chinese looked at it and said, well, this is a pretty good deal. You're going to open up your markets to us, but we're not going to open our markets to you because we're a poor developing country. You have to allow us to continue to cheat until we catch up. And then what happened is people said, hey, this is a efficiency. I'm a major corporation. I can make stuff in China. It will cost me less to make it there. And then I can sell it to Americans. I can make more of it. I can make it cheaper. I can make a bigger profit. And that's what they did. And that's what happened for 20 years. In fact, for the first 5 years after China joined the World Trade Organization, there were millions of job losses in America as companies basically picked up industrial capacity and moved it over there and the money followed. And it worked for a little while for those companies until the Chinese said, all right, well, we no longer need you because we now have 4 companies that do what you do. And by the way, since we forced you to partner with them for 10 years, they've stolen all your secrets. So get out. Thank you very much. We don't need you anymore. Others are so obsessed with having 5% market share in China that they're willing to allow that to continue to happen. Here's the problem. That might be good for these multinationals. It's terrible for us. Because we gave away our industrial capacity. We gave away the things that mattered. We gave away the things that matter in a time of conflict. And now we wake up to that realization. We wake up to the realization that if you look at it, China has the manufacturing and industrial capacity in the world, subsidized by the American middle class. It was our people buying stuff, Walmart buying all these goods that paid for it, and all our capital that funded it. Russia controls oil, natural gas, wheat. We make Hollywood movies and export, services, high-end services. Now you tell me what's going to matter more in a time of conflict? Oil, gas, wheat, and manufacturing, or how quick Uber Eats can deliver something to your door? And that's what we've become. We're an economy today entirely built around services. But in a time of conflict, what's going to matter is those raw materials and the ability to turn them into something that's useful. And when we finally started seeing that for the first time? During COVID. Because all of a sudden, everything we needed, we didn't make it. We need to wear whatever gowns doctors were wearing. We don't make those in America. We got to buy them from over there. We need more medicine. Oh my God, 80-something% of our active ingredients in our pharmaceuticals are made over there. And so the realization of it is 2 things. It has left us vulnerable, but it has also hollowed us out. And entire sections of this country have been the soul sucked out of them. Because the towns and the companies and the jobs that they created didn't just hurt the economy, they destroyed family life. They destroyed community life. They wiped out these places. And the promise was, don't worry, you're going to lose your job, but you're going to get a better job. All the bad jobs are going to go to China, all the good jobs are going to stay here. It didn't work. Millions of people were left behind. In essence, millions of people now find themselves unable to live that life that they want for themselves and unable to leave their children better off than themselves. So they're angry. About it. But that's the central issue. So I say all this because when I talk about China all the time, this is not about being adversarial. I don't want a war with China. That would be a catastrophic one. But I don't want to live in a world where all of the advantages are on the side of this axis of authoritarian. On the side of China, on the side of Russia, on the side of Iran, and America's at this permanent disadvantage. And that's the world we're headed towards. And we need serious people talking about this. The Biden administration, they talk about it, they shoot down balloons, they, send really strongly worded letters to their Chinese counterpart on X, Y, and Z. But they're not prepared to make the changes that need to be made. And frankly, Republicans weren't either for a long time. When they talk about this stuff about the green energy, the only way that we can move on green energy as fast as they want is to buy stuff from the Chinese. The reason why Ford is partnering with that company is because the Chinese control batteries. Although we invented all that. We invented solar panels. We invented the lithium battery. But they control all the lithium in the world, and they control all the manufacturing. So when someone says we want to get from here to there on green energy that fast, what they're basically telling you is we want to send a bunch of money to Chinese companies. This is not an anti-Chinese crusade. In fact, the number 1 victims of the Chinese Communist Party on this planet are the Chinese people. What this is an understanding that we face the single most powerful adversary this nation has ever faced. China is 5 times as dangerous as the Soviet Union. China is 5 times as dangerous because the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons and a military. They had no economy, no industrial capacity, no technology, no ability to compete with us in any of those realms. Not only are they more dangerous, they're aligned. Russia and China were not aligned during the Cold War. They are now, and Iran is joining them. And so we are waking up to a world in which not only do we have a near-peer competitor, but we face a near-peer competitor in partnership with Russia and Iran against the free world. And I'm telling you, if we don't veer from the path we're on right now, you may live to see, but your children and grandchildren most certainly will live to see a world in which all of the leverage, all of the advantages are in the hands of authoritarian regimes like Russia, China, and Iran. And we, the West, are going to be dependent on them for all kinds of things. That cannot be allowed to happen. So when we talk about being focused on the issues that matter, those are the ones that matter. So it's unfortunate, Washington's become a disaster. And it's become a disaster because the federal government, for years, has been asked to do things it had no business ever doing. Our founders didn't want a central government. They wanted the vast majority of our political power, to the extent it was in the hands of government, to reside at the state or local level, places where people knew where their leaders lived and can talk to them individually. They never designed a system where you would have to go to Washington and lobby a senator from New York or a congressman from California about the issues that matter to you here in Florida. But unfortunately, every time we have a problem in this country, someone says, here's a federal solution. And so it grows in power and it grows in cost. That, as much as anything else, is what we need to reverse. If COVID taught us anything, it should have taught us that residing government power at the state and local level is not just the right thing to do, it's wise. It's wise. Because not only can you influence your leaders, but your leaders will make decisions that make sense. And so some places did things that didn't make sense. And those are the places that people are leaving. And places like Florida did things that didn't make sense. And that's why people are coming. And it always, it's a true story. Chuck Schumer was telling me the other day, yeah, that's all a lie. New York, over the last 10 years, has added more people per capita over the last 10 years than any state in the country. And I said, well, then why'd you lose seats in Congress? Yeah, well, the only people moving down there are really rich people, but they're all starting to come back. I said, I don't know. I don't know. But they're not just moving because of taxes. They're moving because some of these places are hellscapes, run by people that are completely out of touch with reality and common sense. And there are even people that are liberals who believe in higher taxes and more government, who don't want to live in a city where you've got a homeless encampment right outside your front door, or where the government hands out needles and sets up drug tents. They don't want to live in a place like that. I don't blame them. San Francisco, beautiful city, great city, one of the world's greatest cities, a disaster, destroyed by its local officials. Now they're talking about, well, the city is going to give out reparations. Can you imagine? I said, from who? Everyone's going to leave, so who are you going to collect it from? So this is the nuttiness that's going on and celebrated by a small sliver of people that have a lot of power. But local control allows some places to say, okay, you guys do crazy, we're not going to do the crazy stuff, and you're going to benefit from it. And that's what's happened. And that's why one of the most important things we need to do, when I tell people in Washington, it's one of our biggest jobs, and it's a hard one, because you got to fight people in our own party. And I will tell you that. You ever have problems with people in your own party, Matt, in Washington? Every now and then he does. Every now and then I think he gets into a tussle with a couple of them. But it's hard to convince people, because every time there's a problem, they're like, well, we should pass a bill. And I go, sometimes the best thing to do is a bill, but not a federal bill. Maybe it's a local ordinance, maybe it's a state law, but maybe not a bill. And oftentimes, by the way, we're trying to solve problems that people solve every single day in private life without a law to govern it. They just do. There's so many things that we solve every day interpersonally. By the way, I don't need a government, rule to tell me, some of these things. People can work those things out if you allow them to do it. So it's a tough thing to do in a place, because you go up there wanting to make a difference. And one of the challenges we have in our party is convincing people that sometimes making a difference is keeping the federal government out of something. Because even though you're trying to help, you're actually making it worse. So we have a lot of work to do, but it starts with winning elections. And my message today is, thank you for what you've done. We would not have had the victories that we've had without it, but don't rest on it. Democrats aren't just going to walk away from Florida. Okay, they're going to come back. They're going to try to rebuild their party. They're going to try to recruit better candidates. They're not going to stay in the position they're in. This is too important a state for them to sit back. Do not assume that we're a 19-point state, because there's no evidence of that. There's one election, but there's no evidence that that's who we are. Okay, we are basically 4 years removed from a Senate race decided by 13,000 votes, and a governor's race decided by 30,000. Just 4 years. A lot's changed in 4 years, but just 4 years removed. And imagine if those two had gone differently. If those two had gone differently, and Rick Scott wouldn't have been elected to the Senate, you would have never heard the name Kristen Sinema or Joe Manchin, because they wouldn't have mattered. They would have had their 51 votes then. And God knows what they would have done over the last well, I know what they would have done. They would have taken over, they would have nationalized elections. They would have added another $1.7 trillion of debt. All that stopped because it was a 50-50 Senate. And if Ron DeSantis had lost to Andrew Gillum, well, yeah. Why even, I didn't even have to speculate what would happen. You know what, I mean, the lieutenant governor would have been governor, I guess, because he would have been in trouble. You know? Maybe not in a hotel room in Miami Beach, maybe it would have been in Tallahassee, but nonetheless, it would have been a disaster. And, by the way, imagine that guy in charge of Florida during the pandemic. He would have had the manatees wearing masks. Okay? So, and that's not easy to do, guys. All those masks are made in China, so the manatee masks. Anyway, the point is that we don't assume that we're an 18 or 19 point state. Every election is different, circumstances are different. Let's continue to build on it. We want to do everything we can to provide the resources so we can focus on what matters, because the stakes are a pretty big deal. You know, what happens here in Florida is critically important because it serves as an example to the country, but what's happening in Washington is really, really important, because we are making decisions over the next 3 to 5 years that will determine the next 100 and what the world is going to look like. It's that consequential, it's that important, and that's why your work is that important. So thank you for having me today. God bless you.